What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Postgame Podcast. I'm here with Cory Smith, here with Brian Geisinger. BG, just not a good game overall for NC State. You know, the final box score looks bad, 76-61, and then it's even worse when you consider the fact that NC State actually went on a 14-2 run to close this thing out. So you could have lost by 12 more points. NC State, I think the biggest lead for Virginia was like 24 points or something, or 27 points at one point, making it was 74-47. NC State, able to claw back a little bit to make it a game, but it certainly was not NC State's morning, afternoon. It was 11 a.m. tip off, and clearly, Virginia was the team that came ready in this one. Just your thoughts overall before we really jump into things, man.
I knew it was going to be a tough matchup. I've watched a lot of Virginia, and I actually wrote a pretty big piece about them for Basket Under Review about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I've seen a lot of this team. I've watched a lot of Ryan Odom at VCU as well, like very analytically savvy team. They do a lot of what is sort of like modern conventional things on both sides of the court. To sort of like maximize efficiency on both sides. And even without Jakari White, and I know Elijah Gertrude got a handful of minutes in this game today, but even without White, they've got 8 big-time players like that are like at a minimum ACC rotation players, and many of them are like plus starter level guys, including guys that bring off the bench like Chance Mallory, who's basically a starter for them. I was concerned with the matchup in terms of like what things would look like for Quadir Copeland, just knowing how good Virginia is at taking away the rim. It's 40 minutes of elite rim protection with Grunlow and Onyenso, and they play a lot of drop coverage, very conventional, stay in the paint, close down the rim. And even though Mallory is on the smaller end, all of the other guards for UVA have good size. Dalen Hall, Malik Thomas, these guys are 6'4", 6'5", 200 pounds. And so Quadir wasn't going to get some of the sort of like bully ball opportunities that he would in this game. I thought there were going to be opportunities for Paul McNeel that proved to be true. It just wasn't enough to swing things. I keep waiting for like the Darrion Williams game. But right now that feels more sort of like wishful than it does likely to happen. And again, I thought UVA, just because of how much sort of like size and strength they have throughout the roster. I mean, they've got Devin Tillis, DeRitter. These guys are like big time guys. That's tough for someone like Darrion to like isolate against, and sort of like pick at, mismatches. And then I thought overall, this was the sort of like the concern I would have had for State heading into the game. Certainly, has to do with would have had to do with Virginia as an elite offensive rebounding team. They actually didn't. I mean, they got about a third of their misses in this game, 34% offensive rebound rate. That's good, not amazing. They didn't get a ton of like second chance points, though I think there were some timely ones that they had early in the game as the lead was sort of like expanding in the first half. But UVA has good positional size and strength throughout the roster, and everyone in their rotation can shoot and pass. And when you're playing a defense like State that just hasn't really been able to get right on that side of the floor at all this season, and has looked leaky from the jump, whether they've been switching 1 through 5, whether they've been hedging 1-5 ball screens, whether it's been the press, whether they've tried throwing different zone concepts, when they're doubling the post and sending 2 of the ball there. Like, it just has not been tight on that side of the floor for State this season. And you have a team like UVA, and they were hot shooting in this game. I mean, Sam Lewis was insane in the first half, especially. And I thought he was really good for UVA on both sides of the ball. But that's a team that's just designed to slice up a defense like State that's going to be like that leaky, So there's more stuff to get into, but I didn't love the matchup from State's perspective to start. And I thought really the only way they would sort of be able to like tilt it and make it seem like make it feel like a little bit more even, or like nudge things in their favor, was going to be like one of McNeel or Williams just kind of like having a superstar game. I thought Paul McNeel was pretty darn good today, but UVA did a good job sort of like keeping a lid on him, at least in the first half. And then Darrion Williams he was okay, but certainly not the sort of like superstar output in, high usage, high creation load that at least I was anticipating from him coming into the season. So I think there's some more stuff to get into, but those were sort of my initial takeaways, was that UVA was poised to put up a good number on offense against State's defense, and 118 points per 100 possessions in this game, and 13 of 19 on twos, 13 of 33 on threes. So pretty efficient performance from again, one of the better offenses in the country in the Cavs.
Yeah, well, before we really jump into things, I want to remind our listeners, as always, visit our iTunes, Google Play Store, Spotify. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit like, subscribe, get notifications so that you can jump on with us each and every single time we do one of these. Obviously, we do have a new YouTube page, so do make sure that you do all those things to our new YouTube page so that you can jump on with us and watch Brian and I, or Charlie and I, and Miles and I, because I know Miles will have a little more free time here soon, so we'll be able to do some podcasts with him as well. Always break down each and every single one of these games, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. We'll be talking about it, so do make sure that you do that. Also, still 30% off if you head over to Pack Power 247 to sign up for a new subscription. So do make sure that you check that out. That's for an entire year, so you'll get 3 to 4 months absolutely free. So do make sure that you check that out. All right, so again, 76-61 loss for NC State, and to me, look, like defensively, I thought NC State wasn't terrible. I mean, you talked about the leaky defense, and it's been at times that way, but I didn't feel like it was terrible today. I felt like more of it was really the offense just not finding its way or really getting going, or just to even keep up pace with Virginia. You're down 40-20 at the half, and it's like, oh man, you gave up 40 points. Yeah, well, you also only scored 20 points. Like this offense is capable of being able to put up 80 points every single night. If you get, 12 to 15 from Darrion Williams, if you get 12 to 15 from Ven-Allen Lubin, if Trey Holloman, who obviously, you lose Trey Holloman and that hurts due to an ankle injury. It sounds like he's going to be okay. Will Wade talked about it afterwards, said x-rays were negative and that he should be okay. It shouldn't be a big deal, but like, you need guys like that to be able to step up. And when you lose Trey Holloman, you get better production from Alyn Breed in the second half. He stepped up in this one, but like it still feels like, and I put this in my post-game takeaways, like your best players need to be your best players. Like Darrion Williams, I know, again, we talked about it the other day, with Charlie, the fact that he's done other things that have helped win. Obviously, you heard it from Will Wade. He talked about it afterwards, said, he's a guy that affects winning. He changes things for us. And, the 4 steals were great today defensively from him, but he also had 2 turnovers, had 1 assist in this game. Wasn't really, the entire team as a whole, outside of Quadir Copeland's 4 assists in this game, had 3 assists the rest of the way, compared to 10 turnovers. So that's not the number you want, but like it still feels like you're waiting on him to get going offensively. Ven-Allen Lubin, just not nearly enough touches in this game today. Only 6 shots for him in the entire game. 3 for 4 from the free throw line for him. So that's the only reason why he got to 7 points. But just the offensive production wasn't there for NC State. You're not getting the right guys' touches. And Will Wade talked about that after the game. He said, 8 shots for Darrion Williams is not going to be enough. We have to be able to find ways to get these guys more scoring opportunities. Like, what are you seeing from an offensive standpoint that needs to be changed, needs to be fixed for NC State to not lose games against power conference opponents in the way that they have?
There's a lot, that's for sure. It seemed like today, one of State's like game plans coming in, and this is an offense they play a lot of 5 out, and you see them run a lot of high handoff action against most opponents, right? That's just like been a big piece of the offensive mix this season. It's modern, it's conventional. They've got the pieces to execute that kind of stuff. They got a lot of guys who can initiate. They got guys who can come off those actions, guys who can space the floor. And it seemed to me like the directive today was, UVA is going to be in this drop coverage. So whomever's playing the 5 for them, whether it's Grunlow or Onyenso, these 2 7-footers who are 2 of the best shot blockers in the country and really do a good job putting a lid on the rim for UVA. When you come off those ball screens and those handoff actions, they're going to be below the level of the screen. They're going to be trying to take away the paint, take away the restricted area, and take away the rim. Sort of like in inverse priority too. And they're pretty committed to that approach. And they're pretty good. Grunlow is really good at keeping his arms high and staying down and sort of only striking for blocks, when the opportunity is there. But if you're attacking that, and State knows that they're going to get that from UVA, those handoffs make some sense because it's like the guy's going to come off of a down screen into a handoff action. So their defender is going to be behind them, and they're going to be coming off that into space because the screen defender is below the level. The only thing is you've got the person coming off those screens, off those handoffs. They've got to be willing to make the defensive 5, Grunlow or Onyenso, commit and make a play, or I thought State too many times came off those actions, and Alyn Breed, who played well, Matthew Abel, they just took tough floaters right when they came off of a screen, or these sort of long twos, and that's the exact shot UVA wants you to take.
Yeah.
That's the exact shot they want. That defensive approach is geared towards stuffing you in a locker and making you take those shots. And I would have loved to have seen, and Copeland was able to do this a few times. Quadir, was able to get this, but you've either got to be able to drive the ball at the 5, as Lubin is also rolling to the rim, and if the defensive 5 stays too close to their guy who's rolling to the rim, then you got to take it strong and lay it up, or force one of the weak side defenders to come off, and then you kick it out to Paul McNeel in the corner or Matthew Abel in the corner. Or you take the ball in strong, and then you force the defensive 5 to commit, take a step or lunge a little bit in the direction of the ball. And that's when you hit Lubin on the dive. You're able to catch to borrow a soccer term, you catch the defensive 5 off of his line like he's a goalkeeper. And all of a sudden you can have the rim's open all of a sudden. And State just got, they really don't have a lob threat like that to begin with. I mean, Lubin is a really nice pick and roll, 5, but he's not an above the rim, lob bot. That would be really helpful against this type of look. State for the most part is sort of at below the rim finishing team. So against an elite rim defense like UVA, State shoots 43% on threes. They took, I think, a few too many tough twos. But again, that's UVA is really good at forcing you into those kinds of looks too. So again, I think some of that State could have executed a little bit better. I don't think the approach was bad. And then I really do need to give a tip of the cap. I tweeted it out during the game, but Sam Lewis, who had a big shooting game today, had hit the 5 threes, 23 points, but his defense on McNeel was really good because he was the primary off-ball chase defender and a big piece of State's offense. The thing that sort of loosens everything up for them is Paul McNeel running around because he's this roving, dangerous, three-point shooter. And everyone knows he's one of the best in the conference, one of the best in the country. He's an NBA prospect because he can do this at an elite level. And he's really the one guy that can, Matthew Abel is shown, I think, is going to get there at some point. But right now, Paul McNeel is the one sort of roving, quick trigger shooter that they have. And if you have a team like UVA that's playing drop coverage, then if Paul McNeel is coming off those flare screens or those down screens around the arc, then often the 5 is going to be dropped below the level of the screen. So you would think that Paul McNeel might be curling into space, right? Because the screen defender is underneath the screen. And so that was one of the reasons why I thought Paul could have a big game, because it's if he curls those screens tightly, he can curl into catch and shoots. And I just thought Sam Lewis
was always there. Yeah,
it was always there. I mean, 6'7", 210, athletic veteran defender. And McNeel had 3 field goals in this game. All 3 of them were when Malik Thomas was guarding him, not Sam Lewis. The 2 threes that Paul hit early in the second half when State went on the big run were both when Sam Lewis was on the bench. I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, Malik Thomas is a totally passable defender with good size, but he's not he's not the same, off ball chaser that Lewis is. And so UVA put a lot on Sam's plate today. And they basically said, well, if we can shut off Paul's water from deep, they don't have anyone else that can really, really beat us from there. And, Quadir, Copeland, 2 of 4, pretty good. Darrion Williams, 1 of 2, just where are the attempts? And obviously, Trey Holloman would be the guy, but then he gets hurt in the first half. And so you don't really have this other, Trey can shoot off the catch, shoot off the dribble. But obviously if he's hurt and compromised, then, you don't have that sort of like other outlet. So, and it worked. I mean, 5 of 20, State's worst 3-point shooting outing of the season. Yeah. And Paul hit 2 of the 5, but just not enough like supplementary shooting. So I thought that was a big thing. And then forgive me, because I don't want to like keep like banging this drum. I've been talking about this, I think every pod we've done, going back to at least like Maui.
Yeah.
One of the best freshman guards in the ACC is a guy named Chance Mallory. He plays for Virginia. Very good player. Like he's legit awesome, and he's going to be he's like the next big thing at UVA. They list him at 5'10", 185 pounds. He's probably closer to like 5'8", 5'9". And I mean, he's stocky and strong.
He's a bucket. Yeah.
He's good. Very good player. But I've been wanting the inverted pick and rolls for Darrion throughout all season. I've just been like, where are these? Where's the pistol action? Where's the 4-1 pick and roll? Where is it?
Mm-hmm.
And this to me felt like a good time where you've got a guy who
undersized,
is 6 inches shorter, 6 to 8 inches shorter than Darrion, and is probably 40 pounds lighter, and I would have spammed like whomever Chance Mallory is guarding, whether it's Alyn Breed, Paul McNeel, Trey Holloman, Copeland, Abel, that person, you got to clear out the side of the floor and have that guy set a ball screen for Darrion Williams. And if they switch Chance Mallory onto him, Darrion needs to post up and try to spin and score, or if a double team comes, pass to the open man. If they don't want to switch that action, if they want to hedge or show and recover, then Darrion's got to pop the ball out and get Virginia defense will be in rotation, get the ball out and pitch it around the arc, look for cutters, look for kick out shooters. And there just wasn't it wasn't on the menu today. And look, like I think Virginia would probably say, like, look, if you want to like divert your offense and try to like, attack Chance Mallory on switches, like bring it, we'll come get it. But I would have liked to have seen more of it. Or even if it was, a guy like Copeland going after him, like that maybe would have been good use. I just like Darrion Williams, 18% usage rate. He hasn't taken a free throw yet in any of the conference games, including today. That to me is sort of like a striking number. He's drawn only 2.8 fouls per 40 minutes this season. That's compared to last season, 3.8 fouls drawn per 40 minutes, which is not like an elite number, but is a good number. And he's way down from that this season. Yeah. Certainly in conference play, isn't drawn a shooting foul in conference play. So to me, when you really stop State, it's like you limit Paul from deep, and then Darrion, who's sort of like, to me, outside of maybe Quadir, Copeland, the best guy at like creating advantages with the ball in his hands, and there just wasn't quite enough of it. You mentioned the 4 steals. Darrion had, I think it was the second steal he had where he got it and then he drove it in transition and had like a downhill, he finished through contact and got the layup. And I kind of thought that might be the thing that got him going.
Yeah.
And it just never materialized. By my charting, the first post up with Darrion Williams wasn't until the under 8 media timeout in the first half. So I don't know. I'm going to go back and cut up the film and review it, and I'll certainly have some more takeaways after that. But on my first pass, it just didn't seem like enough, and that's been a trend throughout the year with Darrion.
Yeah, and I wanted to point this out too, because this is actually a topic I wanted to touch on. I mean, obviously we talked about Darrion Williams, we talked a little bit about Ven-Allen Lubin, and I agree with you. I think part of the reason why Ven-Allen Lubin wasn't, utilized as much is because you do have, the drop coverage, Virginia not basically daring you to take threes, NC State taking threes, not making them early, and that limits what you're going to be able to do offensively. But the bench production to me, and it kind of goes back to something you're talking about too. I wanted to pop this up really quickly, though. Pat said 7 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, and 3 turnovers in 50 minutes from your bench isn't nearly enough. Williams and Lubin both can't struggle either, but the bench has failed to contribute in each of the 5 losses so far this season. Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because, like a lot of your bench production here lately has been coming from the fact that you've had Trey Holloman coming off the bench. The fact that Moussa Sanye has actually stepped up a little bit off the bench at times, and then Matt Abel every once in a while is contributing. But you mentioned it earlier, the fact that they're taking away Paul McNeel and saying, okay, that's your 3-point shooter. Let's try to take it. Let's try to limit him. Obviously, Quadir Copeland has been pretty productive so far this season from 3, but he's not taking 7-8 threes per game. He's not, that's not in his game. The other guy to me that has been missing, Trey Holloman, obviously injured in this game, so you didn't have him a ton. But I'm still the one guy I'm still waiting on to figure out. All right, is he gonna ever get going? You said earlier, he's still got time to get going. He's still got time. Is Matt Abel? He's a guy that coming into this year, NC State expected to be their Chance Mallory. They expected him to be a guy that would produce this season. And, we talked about it early on, going all the way back to Maui, Andy Katz told me, sitting next to him, he's like, that kid right there looks like he's going to be, potentially, a first round pick by the end of this entire thing. And it hasn't been there. The last 5 games, I'm looking back at the stat lines, 1 for 5 in this game, 3 for 7 against Wake, which isn't bad for 9 points. But still, you're not asking him to do a ton. Ole Miss, he played 7 minutes, 0 shots in that game. Also, I want to say he had, he didn't have 0. He had 0 turnovers in that one. I felt like, I'm thinking of the Auburn game. The Auburn game was a struggle. And then Texas Southern wasn't asked to do a ton, 3 of 9 shooting, 33%. You go back to the Kansas game. Obviously, that's a step up. That's a difficult game for him. But, 1 for 4 shooting in that one. The last time he had a good performance was against Liberty, which, everybody had a good performance in that one, 85 points from NC State. He played 18 minutes, had 13 points. But, really since then, and even before then, the Auburn game, 1 turnover and didn't, shot really poorly in that one, 2 of 11. Previous game to that, the Texas game, I still go back to Maui, 0 for 5 in that one. He just hasn't been really, a productive part of this team since the first 2 games in Maui against at least decent level competition. I mean, that to me still feels like, all right, if you could get him going, and that kind of goes back to somebody mentioned, John Old here said Slater and Wade completely botched this entire roster. Obviously, Williams he says a bag of ass. I wouldn't quite go that far, but he said none of this team is good. It just feels like there's just those missing pieces right now, like Darrion Williams getting going from an offensive standpoint. I know he's helping win games for you. He's helping, affect winning in several different ways, but the scoring, the efficiency is not there from him. And then Matt Abel, if you're waiting on the bench to get going, that still feels like the guy to me that, all right, man, if he could ever get back to, what he was doing early on in the season, which I think was, scoring at a pretty decent, efficient clip. He was, scoring a little above 11 points per game coming out of the Seton Hall game. And just it hasn't been there for weeks for him at this point.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. I mean, if Matt had kept up his sort of November pace, the first 2 weeks of the season or whatever, I mean, he'd be starting right now probably, between Copeland and McNeel and the sort of wing backcourt area. And look, his first, I don't know if it was his first touch. It was his first used possession today. It was with about 13 minutes to go in the first half. It was baseline out of bounds on the left side of the floor for State. They run Copeland off of a high handoff action. He gets into the paint, he kicks. And then Abel has a little catch and go finish, through finishes, scores through contact and gets fouled. And so for a second, you're thinking maybe Matt will get going today. Yeah, he gets to the line one more time. But that was the only shot, he made throughout the game. I don't think anyone's questioning like Matt's abilities. I think he's got really nice two-way potential. I think he knows how to play and move without the ball. I think he's got a nice shot. I think he's got a nice catch and go game. I do think Matt, just like physically, he's not fully ready to like finish and play through contact. And I think I feel like we've talked about this on post-game pods before, Cory, but just like he has the ability to like, catching on the wing, catch on the corner. If Copeland or Williams kick out to him, he can shot fake. He's not quite as explosive to like immediately just like run downhill. And then so when the closed out defender sort of like catches back up to him and there's like contact or a bump or whatever, it feels like that produces a lot of tough twos, like, off dribble, fadeaways. He's shooting 50% on twos this season, which is not, a terrible number for a 6'6" guard freshman. But to me, it just feels like there's been I'd have to look at his splits between like the half court versus transition. I just feel like the sort of like slashing downhill finishing in the half court just like hasn't quite been there for him this season. I think it will. Like, I think Matt Abel is going to be a really good player. I feel very confident in that. I'm not, lost hope on him. And to me, he was sort of like a multi-year prospect even coming into this season, though, or, in the middle.
There was some talk of him being,
definitely. I mean,
yeah.
There's some really good people that I know through draft Twitter online that had him as, after the first month had he and Paul both mocked in the first round of some of their drafts. And I think a lot of that has changed. This to me also would have been an interesting game for Paul McNeel. Like, again, I think Paul played well. I thought he showed toughness. I thought his work on the defensive glass, or just the glass in general, to me was appreciated. I thought he was like really one of the guys that really kind of like his movement and his shooting, some of the big shots he hit kind of like kept them going. This is a game, given how sort of aggressive Lewis was closing out on him and chasing him around screens. Like Paul made 1-2. It was in the first half, and it was when Malik Thomas was guarding him. This is one of those games I would have loved to have seen Paul been like more aggressive downhill on the catch. And it's going to be tough because UVA is still going to have size in the paint. So it's not like, they're going to roll out the red carpet and let you just go in there and dunk it. But given how much attention was being, of his gravity is pulling a guy like Lewis out beyond the arc. Like, you and I have seen Paul, like he's like a big time shooter, and State has really fit him into this off-ball mover role this season. But Paul's taken, how many twos has he taken this year? Yeah, he's 16 of 30 on twos.
Yeah.
And he's good free throw shooter too. For a guy like him with his ability to like pull guys away, I don't know. I would have liked to have seen a little bit like that open up the drive for him, because that's the thing like that's going to really make him like really, really dangerous as an offensive player, is not just the catch and shoot, because he can do that for sure. But like, what's the next thing? One of the reasons, like I covered Con Knipple up close at Duke last season. And one of the things that made Con so good wasn't just that he was like an amazing shooter coming off screens like Paul McNeel, but was that Con could really put the ball on the floor. And so when he would get a hard closeout or curl off a screen and guys would sort of like chase him to guard the three, he could put the ball on the deck and get downhill and get to the paint and make a play, draw a foul, find a cutter, kick out to the second side of the floor for a catch and shoot three. And I don't mean to, Con Knipple's the second best rookie in the NBA this year. So like, I don't mean to draw like that too much of a comparison between he and Con, but like Paul, and I could even going back to his freshman season, he's a much better player now than he was then. But some of those games late in the year, UNC, Stanford, Louisville, Wake Forest, just like there were flashes in those games where Paul showed the ability that like he could run a pick and roll, he could get the defender on his hip and attack drop coverage, and he was pretty clever in terms of like reading the backline defenders. And like I get it. You want the ball being run through Copeland, Williams, Holloman, makes a ton of sense. And obviously Lubin initiates a ton of 5 out. So I'm not saying like all of a sudden you got to be running 20 pick and rolls per game for Paul McNeel. I would advise to not do that, but just on some of those sets where you're setting it up for him to shoot a catch and shoot 3, I'd like for whether it's he needs to be empowered or, or asked or whatever. I would just like to see him like look to get downhill a little bit more on those two. Because then all of a sudden that makes it even tougher to take away the 3 for him. If he's got like a counter punch, and right now I feel like he doesn't quite have that. And look, maybe that's something that has to be added in, over the off season, but that to me sort of feels like a next step for him as an already good player to become that much more difficult to stop offensively.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add to all this, Mark said P2 should not be mentioned with Con Knippel. I mean, look, like
an extreme example. I think
it was just more of like, all right, how Con advanced his game was doing what you think that Paul McNeel could potentially do, and that's catching people off of a fake at from behind the arc and then being able to drive to get inside and being able to get those open opportunities. The other thing I'll add too that I was talking about Matt Abel beforehand, like part of the issue for him here lately is as much of a great 3-point shooter as he was perceived to be coming into the season, it just hasn't been there for him. Like he's 31%. Made one. Yeah, I mean, like his 3-point shooting, I'm looking at it the last that 5-game stretch that I'm talking about, against Kansas. And again, some of it's not taking a ton of opportunities, but like the Kansas game, 1 of 3. Texas Southern 0 for 4 from 3. And granted, Texas Southern was also a game where Paul McNeel was just hitting everything under the sun. So you didn't necessarily have to take a ton of threes. It was just kind of like, all right, dish it out to him. He'll hit it. But then Ole Miss, he only played 7 minutes in that game. Didn't take a shot in that one. Wake Forest 1 for 4. And then UVA today 0 for 2. So it's kind of like all right, man, if you're missing the first 2 or 3, you're not taking more than that. So I think some of it's got to come down to like him hitting some of those early ones and being more believable as an outside shooter so that, teams are jumping on him. Like, if teams are seeing him go up for a 3, they're kind of keeping the hand up and potentially defending if it actually leaves his hand. But like, they're not driving out and trying to close out on him to the point where, he's able to just be able to beat them off of a fake and be able to get inside it and hit those shots. So I think some of it's got to come down to him being able to hit some of these shots a little bit more productively to actually be, a little bit more of a 3-level scorer that we expected him to be coming into the season. I know he's a freshman, but like we're talking about a lot of freshmen across the country stepping up. He was a guy that was a top 30 freshman coming into this year. It just hasn't really, gotten to that level yet where I think a lot of people kind of thought he'd be like a 6th, 7th man for NC State in terms of production. Yeah. And it's not been there at all. It's gotten to the point where, Trey Holloman coming off the bench now, just so you can get more bench points because it just hasn't been there from anybody else to this point in the season. My last thing for you before we wrap this thing up, just your thoughts on where NC State is, looking ahead. Obviously we know that, the next few games are very winnable for NC State. You go to Boston College, which is a sleepy Coliseum. Conti Forum isn't always perfect, but it's an area where for NC State you have a chance to be able to go into, get the first road win since 2024. I see a lot of people just absolutely crapping on Will Wade and where things are right now, but like also remember the fact that this team didn't win a single road game all last year. I'm not talking about non-conference. I'm talking about in conference at all. You have a chance to go into Boston College. You have a chance to go into FSU, get 2 early wins in ACC play on the road. BC, a team that right now I believe is 7-7. FSU 7-6. So the 2 teams combined 14-13 overall. Neither one of them have won an ACC game to this point. So you have a chance to go in there and kind of impose your will. Come out potentially 3-1 in ACC play. Do you have a great win in ACC play at that point? No, but you still come home and play against the Georgia Tech team that you have a chance to be able to, get another win as well. So just your thoughts on how this next few weeks kind of shake out for NC State to be able to, make a push and get back into where they want to get to in ACC play before you get to the the daunting back half of the schedule.
Yeah, this to me really feels like the avoid a dumb loss, sort of like part of the schedule, avoid the avoidable, and just to sort of like keep the bad stuff away from the, potential postseason resume. But I think more than anything, it's like, to me, like, I think they kind of got to get back to the basics on offense and just like figuring out how to get Darrion Williams going. Like what's the roadmap? Because what's happening currently I know Darrion, he missed the Texas Southern game, but you got hurt, I guess, against Kansas. So like, physically, I'm assuming he's 100%. Sometimes he doesn't look like it, but just like figuring out, he's their best offensive player, in terms of like talent, versatility, passing ability. And they're not getting enough juice out of it so far. So I would try finding ways to get him going. I would be looking to find other ways to sort of like expand things for Paul McNeel. Sort of kind of what I was just getting at. Like, can you figure out, can he be a little bit more of a playmaker for you? So for me, it really would be like figuring out and like nailing down your sort of like offensive mix, play calling, hierarchy, like really like drilling into that. And then on the defensive side of the floor too, like I would just be trying to really find ways to communicate better on that side of the floor. Because like State has some good athletes. They can toggle schemes and do different stuff. And I know it's been, some of it's complicated a little bit by like Terrence Arsenault not being the kind of like wing defensive piece that maybe we would have imagined him to be coming into the season. They knocked the dust off of him and played him for 10, 11 minutes today. He was not great. But I would just be like trying to like improve connectivity and communication and habits on defense, and offensively, like you have like an offense that, look, they've got the pieces, they've got good pieces, they've got smart people organizing it. And they just got to figure out like how to make that, I think, like translate a little bit better on the floor. So for me, it's all about habits and prep and communication, and just again avoiding the bad loss as well. And I will say, like, I think that FSU, like, that's kind of a tricky game. It's a week from today. It's on the road. FSU is not a particularly good team, but this is they play incredibly fast. They shoot a ton of threes. State's defense gives up a lot of threes. And so that just feels like one where it's like, you just, FSU's going to get some threes and get threes up in that game. And State's going to have to find ways to close out, contest, and hopefully get some misses in that game too. Cause you could end up on the wrong side of the shooting luck for that game too. So that's one that I've got certainly highlighted a week from today too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, like the Florida loss was not bad at all. The fact that you lost to the number 10 team in the country at the time, 78-76 for Florida State, but like the losses they've had since 95-59 to Texas A&M, 103-73 to Georgia, 82-67 to Houston. Now Houston's top 10 team, but like the other two I'm mentioning, yes, they're Power 5 or Power 4, but like they're not great teams that you're losing to in just blowout fashion. I gave up 103 points to UMass, 97-69 loss to Dayton. So like, if you're NC State, clearly that gives you a pretty good indication that if you're going to beat Florida State, it's going to be from the offensive standpoint. Like you've got to be able to, the offense has got to be humming on all cylinders and get that going. So yeah, like back to your point, Boston College is a game where you've got to figure this shit out before you get to that point. Excuse my language, but like you've got to be able to figure all this out before you get to FSU because if the offense is still struggling like it was today, it's not going to be. It might be just an absolute rock fight down in Tallahassee for this game too. So
they're currently up on top. I mean, it's a 2-point game, but they're ahead of Duke right now too. FSU. So something to. I'm gonna flip that game on as soon as we finish up here. So
well, I'm gonna go put the I'm gonna actually go put the Panthers and Bucks game on. So yeah, we'll head out of this thing. But thank you, Brian, for jumping on with us as always, man. I appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Good chatting.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you to everybody for listening. Again, NC State, a frustrating 76-61 loss to Virginia, but we will have much more coverage from this game leading up to, as we just talked about, the game against Boston College later this week. Thank you again to everybody for listening. We will talk to you again soon.